Hi, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to Evoke Therapy Program's broadcast. Today is Tuesday, August 4th, 2020. Welcome. If you have any questions, if you have any topics you'd like me to speak on, you can submit those at any time. This is an open forum, so it's for participants, of course, alumni. It also can be for family and friends. So siblings can attend this, can listen to this. You can also submit questions for them or about them, or even questions that you get asked that you want to be able to answer, and you might want to hear how I might respond to the question. So happy to take any and all of those forms of questions. So with that, we're going to get into questions that are pre-submitted or that were left over from previous broadcasts, and we'll get into those. And then, like I said, continue to submit any live questions you have this evening. First question. In one of your webinars, you mentioned that it is perfectly okay to take care of your own needs by setting a boundary for your children to participate in family time. How do you pose this in a way that does not look selfish on the part of the parent? For example, my needs versus the child, not feeling like it for various reasons. I usually use the rewards to get kids to participate in something they don't want to do, or to limit privileges if they choose not to. So the crux of this question is, how do you set boundaries? And I won't get into the specifics because that's, as I always say, up to you. How do you set boundaries based on your needs in a way that doesn't look like it's selfish? And the answer is you don't. It's probably the most important principle is you have to be willing to look selfish. And I would venture to say that one of the biggest barriers for most parents, maybe more for mothers than for fathers, but for many parents, is that they don't want to appear selfish. So you have to give up. You really do fundamentally have to give up what the other person thinks and feels. And that takes work because we were wired by our parents to worry about what they thought of us. We were taught by them that what they thought and felt about us was about us. And so growing up with that in our background, in our wiring, we simply transfer it onto our children. So the dragon that you have to face, metaphorically speaking, based on the work of Joseph Campbell, the person that we reference all the time, who studied myths, the dragon that you have to face in your battle is, in this case, the dragon that tells you that you're selfish. It's overcoming judgments that you have for yourself or that you fear, and those that come out of the mouths of the people that care about you, is the most important threshold to becoming a person, to becoming a healthy self, to becoming an individual. So it's a great question. Because it really does allow us to kind of consider the heart of the matter, which is you don't get to control how the other person feels. Just be clear about this. If you are attached to your child thinking you're fair, good, loving, non-selfish, whatever it is, that's what they will accuse you of. It would be nice, as I always say, if when we set boundaries in our lives that our family members and the people close to us would cheer us on, and that's not most often the case. Excuse me. The most common response when we change up the rules and start to set boundaries and start to take care of ourselves is that people they give voice to our greatest fears. It's a dance that we all learn unconsciously. So great question, but the answer is you don't get to, and it's actually not important. It's actually important that you allow your child to think that you're selfish, and that you model for them being selfish. You want your child to be selfish when, think about this. This is probably the simplest way to phrase it. You want your child to be selfish when in a relationship they are being mistreated and they decide to set a healthy boundary to take care of themselves, and their significant other accuses them of being selfish or unloving or uncaring, fill in the blank. You want them to have a model and the wherewithal and the wiring. You want them to grow up in a culture where you're allowed to take care of yourself. And you're not going to get it right every time as a parent or a spouse. There are times when you're going to go too far. There are times when you're going to lose your compassion or your ability to compromise or your empathy. That's going to happen as this pendulum swing toward balance begins, but it's okay. That's a part of becoming a self. Becoming a self is a messy, imperfect process. The next question. I have a question about screen time devices in our home. We struggled with managing this in our home before COVID. Now with COVID, it seems to be out of control. Can you share what you do in your home? Maybe some basic screen time rules that have worked for you and your family. I am concerned about kids isolating. I have an 18-year-old that just graduated from high school and two other teenagers. Do you have any resources or suggestions to help create a family set of guidelines or something to go by? I chuckled because you asked what I do, and I'm not sure that I'm the perfect model in this, because sometimes my default is what they describe as any port in the storm parenting. This is a difficult time. I was talking to a private client recently that I have, and they were asking for some ideas about setting boundaries with their children, and some of it had to do with screen time. And I started to come up with some ideas, and then I kept stopping myself because I was thinking this was a young adult situation. I kept stopping myself and thinking, well, this is pre-COVID, right? Your daughter before COVID wasn't isolating in a room and on her device all the time. Now your daughter is doing that a lot, and so it's very difficult. I don't have a lot of experience in COVID. I have a lot of experience pre-COVID, but it goes back to the same kind of thinking that I had in the first question, which is you can't get it right. You just can't. Getting it wrong and is again part of the stepping stone to developing a healthy self. So you experiment with family activities, you experiment with time during the day where there's no screen time, or time at the end of the day where there's no screen time. You can experiment with a whole bunch of things and ideas, and you're going to get it wrong, and you're going to be imperfect about it. And when I say get it wrong, there really is no right way to do it. It's kind of figuring it out for yourself. And I think during this time, a couple of things. I was talking to a colleague recently, and he said to me, I was talking about how I go through periods of COVID where I'm feeling more depressed than I normally do out of COVID. And he said, well, you and all of us are living like a depressed person. You're not getting dressed. You're not putting on pants. I'm wearing sweat bottoms right now. You're not going out. You have to force yourself to exercise and to get activity. And so you're kind of working from the outside in toward depression. And so being kind to yourself at this time and allowing some flexibility with your children can be okay too. It's a rough, unprecedented time for all of us. And the answer is that I don't have any simple solutions or any silver, magic bullets. I'm working it out. I'm trying to figure it out. Trying to come up with creative ideas to inspire and encourage and set boundaries around screen time and devices. And I err on the side of one way or the other. And it goes back to that idea, like the more depleted I am, the less capable I am of kind of coming up with creative, healthy, empowered parenting solutions. So it goes back to the idea that the mental health starts with me, right? I was talking to a colleague also today, and I was saying, this is the most important time in my life for my therapy, because I need that support. I need a place that I can sort myself out and vent and kind of spill over into. So I don't have a great answer for it because it's messy. I don't have a lot of experience with it, and it's really hard to get it right now. Somebody says, what's the best response to anger and resentment still happening in the 9th week? Is the therapy getting to the issue that does the issues does the anger reduce impact? Is the therapy getting to the issues, or maybe does the anger reduce impact? Just trying to kind of, looks like there's a little bit of a typo in there, so trying to sort that out. The best response to anger in the 9th week, speaking of the 9th week of our program, I would say curiosity and detachment. If you could develop curiosity and detachment at the same time, I think that's going to be the most effective at holding space for the child's anger. Not getting invested in them not being angry. That's what I mean by detachment. Um, Use as much curiosity as you can to discover what's beneath it, where it's coming from, what it is, how you've contributed to it in the past historically. But most important, along with detachment, is let go that the goal is to get out of it. See, anger is, if it becomes chronic, it's a poison that hurts us, not others. And so your child is struggling with kind of holding on to this anger and the resentment. And so pull back and make it not about you and release your agenda that they get over it. It would be like any other emotion that they're struggling with. Anger is a secondary emotion, which means it covers up more primary and vulnerable emotions. It's a defense. It's a wall. It's armor. And so getting curious, asking questions, but really detaching. The best way to help your child move through a feeling is maintain your boundaries, first of all. Maintain your boundaries with what you feel comfortable with. But having established that idea, get out of the business of trying to get your child to feel anything other than what they're feeling. Let them feel it. That's the best response, especially with chronic or long-lasting anger. Next question, is it really realistic to believe you can truly live your life as your authentic self? And if so, what does that look like and feel like? It is a constant daily practice to show up in that way. Is it a constant daily practice to show up in that way? I can imagine it would be immensely freeing, but when I try to imagine living my life that way in today's world, it seems like an unattainable goal. Also, as a parent who is able to live that way, what impact does it have on your child? That's a wonderful, broad, and deep question. It's our life's work. I don't think you ever perfect authenticity, but it becomes a practice, right? Practice showing up and telling the truth. Practice not compromising your boundaries. Practice loving without attachment. And practice is an important word because, nobody lives it perfectly all the time. At least I've never met someone who does. I don't live it all the time. I know what it feels like. I know what the project is. I find myself at times in valleys and low points on the journey, but it's my life's work. The hope that I have, I was thinking about this recently as I was kind of in a valley with COVID, as I was thinking that the foundation that I have is that I know what the project is. That I know that being who I am is my job. And there's a kind of a freedom and a hope in that. And so I don't think it's a destination. There's moments when we're there, but I don't think we arrive there. In fact, the most evolved people I've ever heard in my life talk about this are pretty open about how they struggle and about how they fail at it at times or stumble. And I suppose that's part of being an authentic person. So, but the last part of your question is the part that really intrigues me. Um, well, let me talk about the unattainable goal because I talked about it not being a destination, but um, that's the journey. The journey is that you never arrive. You never This is not about succeeding or arriving. It's about traveling on the path. So, yeah, if we think of it as pass and fail, success and failure, it's a hopeless project. But if we think of it as a practice and a discipline and a path, we can have joy and hope in the present moment, right? We can have happiness and peace in the present moment. Not having arrived, not having completed anything, but knowing where we're headed, knowing where our work is, forgiving ourselves for our setbacks. How does it impact the child? It's everything, folks. Living your most authentic self is everything for a child. It models for them what it's like to be a self. It empowers them to be a self in their relationships. It helps them free themselves of unconscious obligations where they think they have to take care of other people and carry other people. It teaches them about intimacy. It fosters resiliency, authenticity, or living an authentic life. And again, it's not a perfection thing, but living and making that your practice. Your child then, you see them. The outcome is you see their authentic self. You see who they are. You're able to be connected to them, and connecting to a child as a parent, a caregiver, in any kind of consistent basis in their life at any point makes all the difference in the world. It inoculates them against addiction. It helps foster resiliency against trauma. It helps build the foundation of mental health. So it is everything. It's the only thing. It's why my work is to invite you all to go back over and over and over again to your work. I've had a few people recently inquire about some of our services, and in the context of their inquiries, the parents have stated an unwillingness or a disinterest in doing their own work. Now, sometimes you get a child into the program and you kind of get a parent to understand what that means, and that it's not punitive, that it's not a blame game, that it's not a search for excuses, right? And then they get on their path, like maybe some of you, and then you start to enjoy the work and really take advantage of the fruits of this work. That can happen too. But some of the folks expressed an absolute unqualified resistance to any idea about their work. And it's hard. That's all you can do. And it's setting the system, the child up in the system for a really, really, really hard path. By the way, notice I didn't say it sets them up for failure, because you don't have your parents don't have to work on themselves for you to get better. It's just harder if they don't. You know, when I'm visiting the field, I tell the clients and the students out there, assume your parents aren't going to make any progress. At least as a thought experiment, assume that, so that you can get to work. Stop waiting for them. And of course, I tell them how much I encourage and teach you all how we do that at Evoke to try to get you guys to do their work. But if they wait around for you to change, they're doomed. They become dependent on everybody else to be okay in their life. So it's harder. What you do when you do this, when you do this work, you don't guarantee anybody else's change. You just guarantee that you're going to have a better life. And when you have a better life, there are absolutely ripple effects in your context. But there's no simple guarantee that everything is going to be better, that your children are going to do well. Next question. Please share about sibling involvement with no current opportunities for on-site visits due to COVID. In my personal example, my son was at a therapeutic boarding school for 7 months and just came to Evoke. My two sons have no contact during this time, and we were just getting ready for their visit when he moved to Evoke. You can start off with webinars. You can start off with some of the books. You can start off with family therapy at home. You can start off with letter writing. You can move to letter writing, maybe phone calls. We kind of at Evoke, we kind of focus on the identified patient and the parents, and then we expand from there. Sibling relationships will work themselves out over time. Sometimes the non-identified patient, the sibling that's left at home, doesn't want to work, enjoys the peace and tranquility when the identified patient is gone. Sometimes they become the new target of the anxiety or the angst in the family. But there are lots of other ways besides face-to-face contact. Of course, we're saddened by the effect of COVID on our family programming, limiting family visits. And I'll talk about an option a little bit later on this evening when I go over the upcoming announcements that could be instead of family visits. But family therapy, webinars, some of the books, letters to your child, talk to your Evoke therapist about options. And then pay attention if you're getting invested in a situation or a dynamic that's more based on your need than both of your children's needs. That's not uncommon for us to observe. It might not be your children's need right now to kind of reconnect or sort things out. It may be. I think there's value there for sure. But it may be your anxiety, again, imagining this kind of ideal, and it might not be the right time and it might not be necessary right now. So be open to that idea. I'm not suggesting it's true in the case of this person that asked the question, or anybody listening, but at least be open to the idea that some of that could be your projection onto the child and not really their need. Next question: how do I better deal with missing my son terribly while he's in therapeutic boarding school? He has been there for 4 months and I don't know how I can get through the next 8 months. Talk to parents. Come to our support group. Find other support groups. Go to Al-Anon in your area. Go to Families Anonymous in your area. Talk to folks on the parent. If you have a mentor, and if you've been to Evoke, you've been offered a mentor. Talk to your mentor. You've got to keep company with people who know what you're going through, and maybe are a little farther down the path than you. You can't do it alone. You can't often just kind of white knuckle and grin and bear it. Find other sources of support. Find peers, people to grieve with. I don't want to be too dramatic and for some people this is a reality, but imagine losing somebody in your life. There's no choice in that, right? You can't undo that. And what's the answer? Is find support. Find support that is not your child. Find other people that you can lean on and that they can listen and be present with you in your grief, because it is grief. It's grief and loss. And the most important thing is get support from somewhere besides your child. Do it for your child. Get support somewhere else so they learn in the long run that it's not their job to relieve your loneliness. That's really, really important in the long run. Not as important in the short run, because in the short run, they want you to be lonely for them so they can come home. But in the long run, they don't want to believe that they have to take care of you. So do it for them. Find support from someone else for them. Someone says, I know how important it is to hold space for my children and people around me. I have to admit that sometimes I'm so exhausted mentally that this can be a struggle. I'm only human. Any advice on how to stretch and strengthen that muscle? I want to change how I show up, but sometimes I don't think I'm showing up well enough. Perhaps I'm being too hard on myself. Sometimes you just can't. That's the answer. Don't do it. Be selfish. Watch TV, watch a stupid movie, read a book, take a bath, take a walk, be unavailable. Get good at letting people down. It's really important. Think about this. Well, I'm going to say this with a great deal of intention. For us to develop and mature and become healthier selves, it's critical that we all learn how to get comfortable with disappointing and letting people down. Think about that. It's really important. It's also important that in our relationships that we take care of ourselves too. And to do that, that means we're going to be unavailable for people sometimes. This is just me. It doesn't have to be you. I like watching sports, and so I'm so grateful that sports are back on television because that's a few hours a week where it's gluttonous for me. I'm self-absorbed. It's the for me the my basketball team, my baseball team, they become my personal my self-care. And I have to battle guilt. I have to battle disappointing my wife and my child. I mean, everybody knows this in my family, so it's not dramatic by any means. People know it. It's we talk about it like this in our family. Um, so you can't do it all the time. The muscle will get stronger the more you take care of yourself. I'll say that again. The muscle for containing other people will get stronger as you get better for taking care of yourself. I could say that 10 more times because that's really the key. Every once in a while, I'll come to therapy, kind of emotionally, psychologically exhausted. And I'll share with my therapist my week from my clients and my program and my staff, um, my friends, my family, everybody, whoever it is that I've dealt with that week. And I'll share a series of stories with my therapist about the week. And it's happened on many occasions where she'll reflect back to me and she'll say, you've been interacting with the defense all week, people's defenses, clients, employees, spouse, children, friends, and so forth. And when she says that, I'm like, that's what I'm doing. I'm kind of complaining about all the defenses that everybody has. And then she'll say, you need to take some time away. Nobody can confront the defense all the time. Or I don't mean confront. I mean, nobody can stand in front of the defense all the time. I meet with her usually on Fridays. This week it's Wednesday. I meet with her on Fridays, and she'll often say to me, as we're finishing up, I hope you can stare at the paint this weekend and drool. Before COVID, she'd say, I hope you don't put on any pants this weekend. Now she's saying maybe pants once in a while would be helpful for you. She doesn't really say that. But the idea is you've got to be gluttonous kind of to increase the muscle. You've got to, I say gluttonous, it's not really gluttonous. It's just what us codependent people think healthy self-care is. I said this a week or two ago. For me and you to set healthy boundaries with the people that we love, including our children, we have to learn to be okay with feeling horrible and wrong and bad. Because healthy boundaries for us people who struggle with codependency, right? Sometimes they're called an empath, somebody who's highly empathic. For us people who struggle with those issues, we have to be willing to feel bad, horrible, disgusting in the service of self-care. That's why having a therapist is important, because you're checking this out, right? And you're learning over time, if you have a good therapist, that it's okay, that those feelings are a lie, that came from your family of origin, that just because your wife is upset doesn't mean you're doing something wrong, or just because your son is angry with you doesn't mean you've done something wrong, right? You kind of use that other person as a sounding board to sort yourself out, because it's hard. It's hard to peel back the layers that became attached to us from our family of origin. And the last sentence in your question, perhaps I'm being too hard on myself. Probably. Very few people are perfectly compassionate toward themselves. They fear that if they're compassionate toward themselves, that they'll become a louse, right? A pathetic slug. Doesn't happen, actually. That gets messy in the middle. They kind of go too far sometimes, but in the end, self-compassion is the only way to enlightenment. It's the only way to moral development, because everything else is primitive moral development. Somebody says, we transferred our child from Evoke a week and a half ago to a therapeutic boarding school. Transfer day went smoothly, and we were missing you all, and I'm struggling with getting a bit sucked into riding the roller coaster. Letters are coming more often, and we are hearing more of the daily ups and downs, and I'm trying to keep up with the replies and feeling I'm not being helpful enough. I also feel like we have stalled a bit in our progress, and we are getting settled into a new environment, routines, practices, and getting everyone up to speed. Any advice or insights? I'm so glad you asked this. It gives me an opportunity to remind anybody else who hasn't gotten to that stage. It's a normal experience. This is the crazy thing about Evoke therapy programs. It's pretty contained, right? You're insulated from your child, and your child is insulated from you. Letters go into the field 1 day a week. They come out of the field 1 day a week. There's phone calls. There are visits during non-COVID times, but you're fairly insulated. In a way, and I had to learn this over the course of years, it's the easiest place you and your child will ever be. It's so supported. The structure sets you up for success. It's not easy. It's not painless. It's not effortless. But it's easy. It's safe. And so when you go to a therapeutic boarding school and there's more contact, that insulation is gone. You are being exposed. It's going to feel like that's what I would say to this parent who asked this question. This is exactly what we want. And guess what? It will get harder when they get home. Think about that. If it's a step up in difficulty from Evoke to a therapeutic boarding school because of the amount of contact and the roller coaster, guess what? At home, it's going to be harder. So this is that in-between stage where you have a safety net, a backstop, if you will, and you're practicing new tools, new way of being. You're in it. It's almost universal for families. It's very rare that it doesn't go like what you're describing. So use this as an opportunity with still some support and still a safety net. Use this as an opportunity to practice new skills for you. And again, my favorite version of support for me is therapy. Therapy, group therapy, having a sponsor, attending support groups, reading, meditating, whatever it is for you, find sources of support. You know, I was talking to a good friend, a longtime family friend not too long ago. And as they were describing some distress in their lives, I said to the parents, I hope you just get support. I don't know that I have a simple cure for what's going on with your children, but you need support. You need to support each other. You need outside support. And I hope you just have that. I hope you can go to a place where you can yell, where you can swear or vent or whatever you need to, where you can talk to an empathic person who can listen and support you. So get some support. Next question. My son came home from Evoke 4 days ago and is already testing the boundaries. Instead of what could have been a conflict, I decided to come up with a solution that made both of us happy. Was the right thing to do, of course. If you found a solution that makes both of you happy, you know, figuring out how to get out of the power struggle, figuring out how not to make it a zero-sum game, which is that there's a winner and a loser. Absolutely. You know what I've learned doing this now for wilderness therapy specifically for 24 years is that nobody's perfect. Nobody's got the perfect answer. Nobody knows what you should do. And that parenting a child that's not struggling with mental health or addiction is hard. Parenting one that has mental health or addiction issues, of course, is much harder. We need support, we need resources, but that sounds beautiful what you just described. Absolutely. Another question comes in. Our son has been in Evoke for 2 weeks. The days leading up to his leaving home were harrowing. He was resistant to therapy, and we assumed he would refuse to go, but we wanted to at least give him the chance to go, the chance to say yes or no, instead of having it come to as a complete surprise. There was little information available as to how to talk to him about wilderness therapy. In the end, we did talk to him about it, and he refused, as we expected. We accepted his refusal without making a fuss and hired transporters. But I wish there had been some information available as to how to talk to your child about wilderness therapy. So the question is, how do you introduce the idea of wilderness therapy to a reluctant child? It's a good question. Couple of various thoughts. There's no good way. The child is going to make it fail. I've been on the phone with children. I've had alumni students talk to children. I've even had children on a couple of occasions over the year come out and visit the field. And in virtually every case, the child at some point says, "This isn't what I expected. This is not what they told me," even when I know that that's what they were told. When I said to my third child a couple of summers ago, "You're going to go on a private wilderness trip for the summer," I didn't try to sell it to him. I didn't try to make it okay. I said, "This is what we're going to do, and it's going to kind of be a work in progress. And here's some of our objectives, and it's not up for negotiation." So the answer is, and I'm not punting, I promise, this is my experience. There's no perfect way to do it. You could show, I mean, I have videos. I have 300 hours of videos on YouTube. I have videos that describe the theory and process of wilderness therapy. There are webinars where I talk about what a typical day looks like. On and on and on. It's just a boundary, and they're not going to agree with it, and they're going to make you wrong. So it's just being simple and vague. Here's what we're going to do. Here's basically what it is. It's a therapeutic program where you're outside camping. You're in nature. And we're going to work on our family issues. So, I think there's a typical day slide. I think I have a typical day slide in here, actually. I can't find it right now, but I could show you other things, but it doesn't make a difference. I promise you. I've tried it all. I've seen it tried. It doesn't make that big of a difference. I know, not having had the information, you imagine it would make you have felt better, but I personally think that the tough, difficult boundary that most parents have to set, that you had to set eventually, is more important for encouraging and facilitating change in the family and with your child. I always say that anecdotally, my own experiences, when children come because they've been talked into it, it takes a week or two longer for them to get engaged. The research shows no difference between the two in terms of their outcomes. My own personal experience is a child that, quote unquote, agrees to come, they usually have to take a little longer. I did a blog on transporting. You can just Google Brad Reedy and transport and read about it, where I talk about this at length a little bit more. Do you have a podcast on the 4 types of attachment? Yes, it's called Attachment Theory, I think is what it's called. I think that's what it's called, Malia. You can check, but I think it's called just Attachment. Someone says, what is the percentage of kids who go back to a home directly from Evoke? It seems that therapeutic boarding school is the next step. It's about 2/3, 1/3. 2/3 go on to some kind of out-of-home placement. 1/3 comes home. I talk about that. In fact, I just did a webinar podcast recently on coming home after treatment, where I talk about that at length. It's our experience that tells us, not our theoretical stance, but our experience of having done it for decades that tells us that that's typically a better course for many of the families that we deal with. So about 2/3 go to some kind of therapeutic supportive away from home setting after Evoke. Any other questions, Malia? Okay. Malia's just passing me on questions. Are there challenges with attachment theory and a teen with social communication disorder? Yes, more than one. If your child has learning differences, learning disabilities, if they're neurologically atypical, there are two problems, primary, that come with that. Number one, they're different than you are. And then that's going to be a problem from your end, right? They're going to process, respond to life, cope with life very different than you do. And so that creates a barrier between you and them from your end. And then from their end, their interpretation of it is going to be off, right? They're not going to be able to read cues. Obviously, providing a secure, healthy attachment, non-anxious attachment is what I'll call it. A consistent, stable person in their life is better. Probably the biggest thing after saying that out loud, I realize is it will require more of you. And you'll get less positive feedback from the child. You'll get fewer reinforcers from the child. You'll kind of have to operate in the blind, if you will. And the child won't experience it in the way that you or I might experience it with insight and awareness. They'll feel the presence of, right? Healthy attachment is characterized by two things: safe, and you can do that for your child, and welcoming, that you welcome who the child is. If they're different than you, or how different they are than you, presents a challenge from your end. But if you're non-anxious, there's a lot of anxiety often associated with atypical neurology, right? Autism spectrum disorder and other atypical neurological presentations. And so there can be a lot of anxiety. So just like dealing with a person who's having a panic attack or a person who's hard to soothe, the less anxious you are, the more you're able to provide for them a safe context. If somebody's having a panic attack and they show up in your bedroom at night, how you respond to them will be in part based on your level of anxiousness, of your level of anxiety. So absolutely, it's going to present some challenges. You're going to need more. It's going to present a barrier from your end. You're not going to get reinforced, but it's better than non-healthy attachment, right? It's better than non-welcoming, non-safe. It's better than anxious attachment, chaotic attachment. It's better than the other forms of attachment, insecure and avoidant. It's better than all of those. All right, looks like Malia has posted the blog about transport that I did there, so you can look at that. Any others, Malia? I've been seeing this next person. I've been seeing a therapist twice a week since April. It's been helpful and I feel supported. I struggle with dividing that time between getting support for the immediate concerns versus digging into the deeper work. It's hard to do the deeper inquiry when I'm feeling frazzled about the day today. I keep thinking I'll get to the past and then we'll have time to dive in. Do you have any suggestions on how to think about this or structure therapy visits? You know, when I go to therapy, I talk about, I don't go to the past. I think I shared this recently. I've kind of concluded this. I've developed this idea that we don't necessarily, I don't, my clients don't, we don't go to our past and try to figure it out. We do at the intensives, actually, but typically in therapy, that's not how it works. We kind of talk about the argument we had at the grocery store today about somebody not wearing or wearing a mask, right? We go to that. We talk about the fight we just had with our spouse or our child not getting out of bed in the morning to do their online school or whatever it is. We talk about the stress of our job. And then through that discussion, we trace it back toward home. Malia, will you Google Brad Reedy, Psychology versus Therapy, and click on that link and then share it also? It's a journal article that I wrote about supervision of in residential and wilderness therapy programs. And basically, it's this idea that the mistake that gets made is that if I am talking about the fight I just had with my wife earlier this afternoon with my therapist, and she's just focusing on problem solving and fixing it, which there's space for that. But if that's all we ever do, we don't get to the heart of the matter. But there are opportunities in that discussion with her in therapy, with my therapist in therapy, for her to say, so why did that come up with you, for you? Where does that come from? Or wow, that reminds me of what you've shared before with X, Y, or Z, right? That's how we get to the past. So I would say 80% of the discussions I have with clients in my career are about the here and now. But because I know that the dilemmas of our lives are rooted in our histories, we go back through those stories to the past. Because I know myself and where they come from. I think I've shared this with you all folks before in the audience, that my therapist used to say early in my work with her, I've been seeing her for 21 years, she would say to me, well, this is because your mother was that way or your father was that way. And I remember thinking, I've told her this many times since, I remember thinking, you don't know enough about my mother and my father to make those comments. That doesn't make sense that you would say that. It kind of didn't fit. And I definitely knew that I hadn't shared enough of the details about my upbringing for her to make that kind of interpretation. Now, today, it's easy for me to see that everything she was saying back then is true. And now when a client comes to me with a current day dilemma, with a spouse, with a partner, with somebody at work, now I know what their previous contexts were like. I know what their childhood was like because it comes up in that. You can see it. You can see how they're wired. You can see their thought processes. You can see how they internalize people's behaviors, you can see all of it. So my answer is you go with whatever you want to talk about. That's a fundamental, for me, premise of therapy. You just go and you talk about whatever you want to talk about. It's then the therapist's job to help you make those connections. The article that Malia just posted about the link there, you can either Google Psychology versus Therapy or Brad Reedy. It's right there. So that's actually not it, Malia. It's Psychology versus Therapy, Brad Reedy, and it's in the NatSap journal. I think that's my Psychology Today blogs. No worries. So we'll wait till you post that. Someone says, how much difference do you see between therapeutic boarding school and traditional boarding school after Evoke? Traditional boarding school is not really. I think traditional boarding school can be as difficult or more difficult than home for kids. There's less accountability. In the short run, it can be less stressful. You're not holding a boundary. But I don't, it's two different animals completely. I don't even think the continuum makes sense. It's not like wilderness and acute care is up here. You know, residential treatment centers below that. Therapeutic boarding school is below that. And I don't think that the next step down is traditional boarding school. I think traditional boarding school is equal to or even more challenging than home. Virtually all of them are not set up to handle people struggling with acute mental health or addiction issues. We receive many of our clients from traditional boarding schools over the years. So Malia's, she's giving you the link to my Psychology Today portal, but she's also giving you the link to the NatSap Journal article that I wrote about therapy, where you talk about kind of how not to make therapy a problem-solving thing, although problem-solving happens, but it's a deeper dive, and it's assisting a client in becoming a person, becoming a self. Somebody says, what are your thoughts on somatic therapy versus talk therapy? I'm enjoying that at this point in my work. I know it is a matter of preference as I deal with the feelings versus telling the stories over and over again. I find it to be very beneficial. It's not something I do a lot of as a client, but I'll talk about this. I'm on board with somatic experiencing. I've had therapists do it in my presence with clients. They've gotten to places that I didn't get to with the client with talk therapy. I've done some of it myself. It's absolutely beneficial. And this goes to a larger point. When I have a client that I'm working with and they say, what about EMDR? What about brain spotting? What about somatic experiencing? What about biofeedback? What about CBT? What about DBT? What about ACT? Right? They'll go through the gamut. My response is try them if you want to. Absolutely. If you think it'll be helpful. My wife has the same therapist that I do. She's actually been going 1 year longer than me for 22 years. And she's done some of those modalities also in addition. So absolutely, if it works for you, do it. That's just the thing is, if it works for you, do it. Our son is at Evoke for the second time, and he will go to an aftercare program after Evoke. In your experience, have you ever seen kids hurt in their inside because of being sent away for so long? I've seen kids hurt and angry for going for their being sent away, yes, but I also have a blog, Malia. Maybe you can post this. Today's the day of the links. Will My Child Forgive Me? I think I did a blog called Will My Child Forgive Me? And then so Google Will My Child Forgive Me and Brad Reedy, and I think it'll come up. You're all going to dent your children. All of you. You have and you will going forward. You will bruise and dent your children. We don't do it on purpose. It's not, I don't state this to take away accountability. The goal is that you let them be mad and hurt and angry. And when they say, Mom, Dad, you did this wrong, your response is, I'm sorry. Thanks for telling me. I'm glad you're talking about it. Let them be hurt and angry at you. You're doing your best. You're taking your best guess. The key will not be getting good enough. The key will not be getting good enough. The key will be learning to let go of the outcome, to letting them be mad, sad, frustrated, angry. I did a podcast a month and a half ago or so, maybe 2 months ago, called Challenging the Notions of What It Means to Be a Good Parent. I strongly recommend that one to you all. For me, it was a seminal idea that I learned about. And something that I've learned in therapy, that I wasn't taught what a good parent was. I thought a good parent got it right, knew the answers, right? Was really, really good. And I've learned that being a good parent is being a person, fallible, imperfect, willing to let a child be angry, sad, frustrated, disappointed. So the biggest contribution that you can make toward your child moving through their feelings is not to follow a course, some imagined course where you get things perfect or near perfect, you make all the right decisions, because that can never happen. The path is letting them feel what they feel and welcoming it and inviting it and valuing it. And then they'll move through it. They'll forgive you for the sins of omission, the sins of commission that you made. They'll forgive you for your imperfections, but they'll struggle to forgive you if you need them to forgive you, if you need them to get over it. if you get invested in them not being angry, not being hurt, not being resentful. Next question. Does your family therapist need to be familiar with wilderness therapy? We can't seem to find anyone that knows anything about it, but we're not really sure if it really matters. No, I don't think they need to be familiar with wilderness therapy. If they're very judgmental and ignorant about it, you can introduce them to us or to me, and I'd be happy to talk to them. You can give them a copy of my book, or you can give them a link to the podcast, or whatever. I'll send a copy of my book to them for free. I'm not trying to sell a book and make the $2 that I make on it, the $1.25 that I make on it. I'll send them a book if they want to. I think it's okay to say, I'd like to pay you to read this, or to like it's important that they understand. Now, I don't know everything about everybody else's life, but I also am the kind of therapist that if you come to me, I don't know what you should do. I don't know your answer. So if they're open-minded enough, they don't need to know about it. If they're opinionated about it, they probably better educate themselves about it, know what they're saying. But I'm happy to send them a book. So if you have a family therapist, I wrote a blog, Malia. I know you're gonna go crazy today. I wrote a blog on what to look for in a therapist. You can look at that. I don't think they need to know it all, but if they have strong biases, then they need to educate themselves. Any other questions? The podcast for challenging our culture's idea of what it means to be a good parent is episode 309. I'm going to cheat and help you a little bit, Malia. Somebody said, is there anything between that spectrum you just mentioned between a therapeutic boarding school and home, as a therapeutic boarding school seems to be 12 months? There are transitional programs, yes. There are transitional programs that get your child into the community. You could find programs that have more interaction in the community and are more flexible. It's not 12 months or nothing. It's challenging, but it's not. So you can ask your consultant about that. Someone says, I've been having a bit of guilty feeling about focusing on the here and now, and I'm feeling like I need to set aside time to go back or go deep. My therapist has said we talk about whatever you want to talk about, but I think it's my personality to want to be making the connections, and I just need to let the process unfold. Thank you. That's my experience. Your therapist sounds wonderful, by the way, that we talk about. That's what I would say to somebody. I guess that means I'm saying I sound wonderful, but I believe fundamentally that it's not the therapist's agenda that's the important agenda in therapy. All right. That's all Malia says. So thank you, guys. Upcoming intensives. Our intensive staff are wonderful. We're an attachment-based experiential program. I know online and experiential don't seem like they would go together, but they really do. I love them. I just did one last week. I'm doing one again this week. Well, actually, the one this week is a private one in person. But I did one online last week. The next one for in person is September 16th through 20th. The next online one, Finding You, we have one spot left, I believe, August 12th through 14th. If you want a deep dive, a therapy accelerator, a therapy springboard, these are fantastic. I believe in them. I do them. My entire family do them. My therapists and my managers do them. We really, really, really believe in them. Contact intensives at evoketherapy.com for more information. If you want a Pursuits Adventure trip, I was going to tell you about this. We've always had Pursuits Adventure trips, or we have for years, I should say. We're not accepting in-person visits, but you can ask your wilderness therapy if a Pursuits trip after Evoke and before a therapeutic program are right for your family. So they're customized. Think about anywhere from a few, around a few days. So you can get some of that contact with some therapeutic support before you go into the next setting, if everybody thinks it's the right clinical decision. Contact Sarah at evoketherapy.com for more information about our pursuits trips. Parent support groups coming up this week, August 6th. Matt Hoig at 6 p.m. Mountain Time will be hosting for our alumni families. If you're an intensive alumni, the next one is August 11th at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Contact Malia at evoketherapy.com for more information. We ask all current parents to try at least 6 12-step support groups. Any combination of Al-Anon, CODA, Families Anonymous, Adult Children, refugerecovery.org is a nice option, and NAMI.org is a nice place to go to get resources in your area that are free or very affordable. All of these broadcasts are available on the podcast app, by any podcast app platform, searching Finding You, an Evoke Therapy podcast, or on the SoundCloud.com website, search Finding You, an Evoke Therapy podcast. You can find our program on Twitter and Instagram using the handle at Evoke Therapy. You can find the intensive program on Instagram and Facebook by searching using Evoke Therapy Intensives. On Facebook, the Evoke Family Foundation, that we still need more support and membership from. This is a foundation that helps people that can't afford therapy. You can go to evokefamilyfoundation.org or go to Facebook and search Evoke Family Foundation. Our blog is available each week with new content. My 2 books, The Journey of the Heroic Parent and The Audacity to Be You, are available on Amazon. The audio book will be out hopefully. We've submitted it. We're just waiting for approval. Hopefully it'll be out in the next couple of days. I'll, of course, make a big announcement about that. The next broadcast will be how to restore trust between you and your child. Another request from a parent. How to restore trust between you and your child. That's August 11th, 2020 at 7 p.m. Mountain Time. So I look forward to that. I hope this is helpful. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I hope this is a helpful point of contact for you, or if you're listening to the podcast on the app, I hope it's a helpful thing to kind of keep you reminded of the project, of the work. Take care, folks. Have a great evening. I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.